Today, Call the Doctor session is about ways to document, well, to describe the content of HDF5 files in some way. And hopefully from that description, there could be a way to generate documentation about the file content. And before I start talking about that thing, which was inspired by this forum post from almost 2 weeks ago by Mike Jackson, typically there's a question of anyone who is at this call live, are there any HDF related questions? Anything? All right then. If not, or if your idea pops up later, just stop me and ask. This is all not scripted heavily, so we can always adjust our discussions. So let me start my thing. So basically, when this question on the when I noticed the question on this forum, I immediately thought, here we go again, because I'm very familiar with this kind of questions and requests, and I'm not personally familiar with any method or approach that really tried to be useful to more than some group of people somewhere who worked on some project. So in other words, heavily dependent on some group that happened to use HDF5. And I thought that maybe there is enough interest now that we can see to sort of join forces and do something about that and develop something that can be useful to not just a small group of people or community, but go across all or multiple of communities that you happen to use HDF5. And I actually worked our company had a project for NASA called HDF Product Designer some years ago, and kind of was involved, and some part of that project was actually trying to address this kind of need. But that project is defunct now, and also the code on that project was not open source. So that whatever was done, it's kind of locked there. And so, so I have some experience trying to address these issues. And from that experience and all these years afterwards, thinking how to maybe address it, I came up with a couple of principles. And one of them is that it has to be a format that is really approachable to as many people as possible. In other words, it cannot be only for a software developer who is very much skilled and experienced with HDF5 API or HDF5 file format and things like that. It really has to speak to people who are just thinking that they want to store their data, and someone said, well, HDF5 might be a good way for you, and they just want to document how that data needs to be stored. So in other words, it has to be able to grow in detail, but not to be too demanding from the beginning. The other part is it has to be shareable. We now live in days where not a single person does everything, and so it has to be some kind of format that's easy to collaborate on. That's another one. And the third one, whatever is chosen, has to be easily parsed by as many programming languages as possible, so that people can write tools that do something with them. Rather than being a unique format that no one can parse unless they use a specific tool or something like that. So those are the things that I kind of thought about. And then if you start from that, then generating documentation about the content, it really is just having a tool that's going to go through the document and produce output in some other documentation format. In this mentioned HDF Product Designer, we basically used HDF5 JSON as intermediate representation, and then generated Word document, produced a Word document with some kind of formatting using it. So it's possible, it's doable, obviously. And so what are the options? I honestly don't know anything that, what I've seen in the wild is some people use the Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets as a collaboration tool before the Microsoft created this 365 drive and online capabilities to collaborate on their documents. I've seen people using JSON in some kind of a flavor. Again, the benefit was that JSON is easily parsable in any programming language. And then you go from there. Also is a text format, so it can be in the repositories, can be diffed against, people can see the differences and who did what. And others just basically start writing straight into some kind of documentation format like Google Docs or Word or something like that. And as I say, that's the part of documenting. But what was the people who use JSON and Excel, they try to address a little bit of actually designing the content of the file and being able to sort of discuss what goes into the file and how. And again, I think that HDF Group as a company does not have resources to really provide this kind of thing just out of nowhere. And so I think this is a nice project that the community could decide to take on and do something. Many hands make work light or something like that. So I think this is a good opportunity to see. I think it would benefit a lot of people, definitely, and it would be a nice add-on to other things about HDF software. What's out there? Well, the what was mentioned in this forum was this HXML based documentation. Unfortunately, with XML, it fell out of. It's not anymore cool to use XML, but XML requires a higher level of skill, I think, to actually write it out. So I don't think this is really the right approach to use it. The other thing that was mentioned here was HDF5 JSON, as I mentioned, and it is possible to carry on. There was some chat thing I didn't. Yeah, YAML instead of yes. I'll cover that. Hold that thought on YAML. So HDF5 JSON, as I said, it has proven to be a very useful intermediary form. In other words, it can be used to pass on information about HDF5 file content in between various tools. So if you're creating some kind of a tool chain, it served very well. But as far as writing documentation in it, there is one problem with it, and that is, I can show here. Okay, here's the classic. The classic being, it's how can I make this smaller? Yes, it is a description of one file somewhere from our documentation. And here's the complication. All the groups, as you can hear here, and all the data sets, as you can hear, HDF5 data sets, they are kind of listed flat with no hierarchy. The H in HDF5 actually is hidden basically here in this kind of links thing. And that is definitely going to confuse people and be really, really difficult for them to write out the contents of the file with this kind of requirement. And so that's why I think HDF5 JSON is great once you kind of start doing something with software and for chaining software tools to do something, but not for people to actually start describing content of their HDF5 file. So scrap that. Speaking of YAML, this is forget about all of this. But this is my little pet thing some years ago that I wrote down after the HDF product designer kind of happened, and I tried to sort of lay down what I thought would be the better approach, or more the right approach. We had one with HDF product designer. We kind of found the warts and all, and then I thought this might be a good one. And the reason why I said this because yes, I actually used YAML to propose it. In other words, it is a YAML document describing the content, and I'll just go briefly for it because I think it addresses some of the issues that are mentioned here as a problem. So I'll just go to the examples because it's easier. So let's use JPSS5 for example. So this is a version of HDF5 file, but what I try to address with this approach is that the groups are now fully specified. There is no indentation and groups within groups kind of stuff. The group is the first order entity, if you will. So every group is clearly visible and spelled out in full, so that the user really knows from the get-go in which group it is and what is documenting in that group. Because other approaches where group is within group, then within group, then you have to follow the indentation, figure out exactly where it's complete. The other thing here is that it's clearly saying attributes into the group belong here. Describing their values is can be more detailed, but can be as simple as just the value. And so here it's a little bit more complicated because of these files. Unfortunately, they used, for some reason, they stored single string values as two-dimensional arrays. So it wasn't really good, but literally this format was enough if you just set the value and that's it. In other words, allowed user not to be weighed down by all the details of HDF5's possible storage options. You just think about string value and then let the tools deal with it afterwards if you don't care. If you do care about the details, then there was a way to specify those details about how to store that particular string. And then the other part was this ND arrays, which meant, HDF5 datasets. And then describing it, the type, shape, and then if you wanted to be, as I said, detailed, then this was kind of the thing you wanted to say. But you didn't have to. And so that was the idea. I never really moved further than sort of laying down these things. But again, I'm not promoting this. As I said, this was my pet project. But I think that if we, as a community, decide to pursue something like this, I think we should approach this kind of foundational principle. Keep it simple. Make it obviously hierarchical. Adopt something like YAML or some other text format that's easily parsable, not overburdened by curly braces, and then go from there. And if need be, and it comes to actually HDF5 specific, then probably maybe HDF5 JSON can be plugged in later as tool-to-tool input-output kind of thing. So that's about this thing. Obviously, just to show you, there are simple examples like this one is, as you can see, just attribute and value. And that's enough in some cases. This is the attribute that has a little bit more information because it needs to have more information. Then this is how you would basically do it. But that's that. The other option that got mentioned in the in this thread was this H5RDM toolbox, which I have here. And this is a fairly new thing that I learned about. I think Garrett told me about it. And it is a bit different because it lays on a lot more things on top of it. What I discussed so far was really just the HDF5 file content at the HDF5 level. This one actually brings other concerns that may be of interest to scientists and other people: fairness in data, then various conventions, ability to sort of validate the file content based on the convention. And it is very interesting idea. The one cautionary here is that it heavily depends on Xarray. And Xarray is a Python package, very popular, but it kind of builds on top of NetCDF version and view of HDF5, not on HDF5 original, if you will, or HDF5 native capabilities. So I have not really spent much time looking at this package and what it can do, but just seeing Xarray tends to give me some indication that yes, seems to be very capable, but you are kind of then really going into the NetCDF view of HDF5, which is a subset of capabilities. So for some people in HDF5, that may not be enough. That may be lacking some capabilities and things. So that's just the one caution here. But other than that, seems very capable. I mean, definitely I could see, for example, combining something like I talked about, describing the content, and then this thing, having a look at it or generating some information about it or using it in some way. And see, this is really all I have. Oh yes, sorry. So the final thing that got mentioned in the in this thread was this description of a file content. This is done by, what is this? Oxford Instruments Nanoanalysis. They have, I think, some kind of devices that are very quick to read DNA strands. And so this is a markdown on GitHub that describes their content. Yes, this is good, but I think this should be an output of a tool, not the actual, the beginning of everything, or the only thing. And that's basically all I have here. It would be interesting to see if people have some questions or their views of what not, or do they have they really faced this problem and how they solved it, or what they're using.
Alexander, this is Robert. I have a question. If you look at your YAML representation, if that were expressed in JSON, does it just get too cluttered?
Maybe. I mean, obviously, you have a lot more curly braces here. Every indentation would probably be a curly brace pair.
Yes.
But yeah, so I thought YAML again, mostly because of not having curly braces.
Right. No, it's much cleaner. And if it's just the starting point where other pieces of the tool chain take off, then certainly the uncluttered look of this is very appealing.
Yeah, I mean, when I interacted with people, I realized that again, everyone brings different expertise in HDF5, understanding of HDF5. You could easily say that this is really any data cube format we're talking about here. Just, at the end, something may be easier achievable in one or the other, but doesn't have to be that HDF specific at this level, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, that's why I chose YAML.
Yes. No, it's nice.
And I thought nowadays a lot of these configuration files for a bunch of stuff are in YAML, so people are familiar with YAML. And these text editors that are popular, they all have some special features with YAML, syntax highlighting, all these kind of things. So I thought, it can work.
Yes, so
but it doesn't. Yeah,
you could load in keywords and everything that were specific to your HDF representation here.
yeah.
Ah, okay. No, thank you.
Hey, Alexander, this is Mike Jackson.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, thanks for doing this today. This was pretty cool. I do have a question about your tool. So I am a JSON guy, but I do like how this YAML is clean, like a couple of the other attendees have stated. Does your tool, can I throw like an exemplar file at your tool and your tool will pump this out? Or is this just like, hey, this is what it should look like and I get to do all of this?
Yeah, I don't have. There is no tooling around this. This was just an idea.
All right. Yeah, it'd be nice if there was a tool I could just throw my file at it and then at least it would give me a starting place, but yeah. Anyways. Okay. And then I have a kind of a question for everybody generally. I'm not a professional document writer, as probably most of us aren't, but if you were reading somebody's documentation on, so say you got handed an HDF5 file and you are trying to write your own API to like write a compatible HDF5 file, and you're reading the documentation, do you want to look at YAML, or do you want to have it nicely out like that H5OINA page? Or I don't care, just give me the information, I'll parse it, I'll figure it out. Like, does anyone have like a preference?
Well, let's see what others say first. One thing that we also had at that product designer thing was that we could actually spit out Python, MATLAB, IDL code that would basically create that file out of HDF5 JSON.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, so that was another thing. So to me, what you could use something like this YAML or whatever else is that actually, if it sees this, it can write out the code that would at least give you some templated example of how you would read stuff or how you would create the files with that, depending what you want to do.
Right.
But as I say, this one, and I'm going to show you more, as I said, this was just an idea. Once I walked out from that product designer experience, I thought, let me write down these things while they're still in my head. I think they still hold up pretty well. This was done, what, 2018. But again, anything else about tools and things, it needs to be written. And that's why I said, I mean, if we really think this is a worthy cause, and then we, decide what kind of approach we want to do, and then, bring up the community to do it. I mean, that's how open source software is supposed to function, right?
Right.
But again, I felt that something clean with some kind of text format that, again, is not overwhelmed with the amount of details, because, HDF5 can be extremely detailed. And, so you just add as much as you want or you care about. And then from there, you can start having tools that, start producing things, whatever you want. As far as reading documentation, I don't know. I mean, personally, I've seen a lot of things like this, where basically there was a Word document or LaTeX document or some kind of a Markdown or whatever that basically lays it out like this. I honestly think that if you had a tool that's going to give you a templated code for reading and writing, that's probably going to be the most useful thing that anyone cares, because at that point, that there is a lot of accuracy in that code, no bugs and things when that gets fixed. But other than that, this is essentially, you read it and then you have to write it yourself.
Right.
And I can see here already they're making questionable decision to store a single string as a two-dimensional array. So, why doing this? But anyway,
I don't know if the 1x1 really means what, not because I'm pretty sure
dimension.
I think they're just. I think the guy who wrote it. I've talked to him before. I think it just shows up as an all terminated string. So I think it's just a matter of kind of how he's stating this. But I get what you're saying though. It's not it's not super clear. He probably should state that's a null terminated string.
Well, I mean, you can have null terminated string, but it is in 1x1 matrix.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
So,
anyways.
So anyway, that's all I have really. If we do think that this would be helpful, and as far as HDF Group, I guess, and Lori is here, we can blare it through our social media presence. To summon some people and get together and start, hacking on some, or agreeing how we want to approach these things, and then doing it. That's one option. Other than that, this video will be recorded for posterity, and see what happens.
Alexander, I just had one other question. It would be nice if this representation were positioned in the tool chains to handle bidirectionality, because sometimes the Achilles heel of these types of things is it's very difficult once you then make downstream changes to actual HDF5 code to sort of get things propagated back to, in this case, the YAML file. And if you can accomplish that, then any changes or modifications that somebody makes to something that has been processed, a YAML file that's been processed, can easily get backported into the YAML representation. Then it's a tremendous win, because just sometimes these things get so brittle. Code gets generated, code gets modified, and then there's no way to get those modifications back into, in this case, the original high-level specification. And if you can solve that problem, things get a whole lot nicer in your tool chain. So, and it has really, I think, has to do with being able to make your representation a little bit of, I hesitate to use the word, but maybe the center of the universe, or at least a center. So you can solve that backporting issue. In other words, I just think I've seen these types of high-level representations that can get really brittle, and then it diminishes their usefulness.
I think well. So what you're saying basically has to be some kind of importing capability as well, that you show up an HDF5 file, and then you get some kind of representation of that file's content in some flavor or whatever is adopted as the description of the file content.
Yes. In other words, if somebody uses a downstream tool and they refine a storage characteristic or anything like, or even a chunk shape, something as simple as that, it's nice to be able to go back to the original and get it updated, so that these things aren't lost, and that way that YAML specification is still valid without a lot of manual intervention. So that's just, it'd be nice if it's achievable like that.
So we do, I mean, HDF5 JSON that I unfortunately so conveniently closed before. It did have this package that basically was able to generate HDF5 JSON from a given file.
Yes.
Or it could create an HDF5 file from a given HDF5 JSON. But as I said, this HDF5 JSON is really not suitable that you can immediately start hacking on it in terms of humans deciding on file design and everything else. It's really machine to machine ideal, but other than that, I don't think it can serve the purpose. But yes, I agree. Yes, the importing should be there. And then once you have this format, then you can create a bunch of other tools. Absolutely. I mean, you know, as these kind of efforts go, to me, the most important thing is agree on the format, how to describe these things, the file content, what's the acceptable one. And once you have that, then obviously you have a core, and then any contribution feels like it's worthy because that core should be stable and agreed upon, so that anyone's effort doesn't just go away because something's changed. That's how I see things developing. I mean, I can probably, I don't know if regarding this product designer, again, this is all built around HDF5 JSON, so it's not really helpful here much. But I don't know if it's worth us trying again to maybe start open sourcing process, because that work was before NASA was really heavily involved, you know, leaning towards open source in software. Because we didn't have, we tried once, and we as a company we didn't have resources to basically play that lawyer game, to go through all that was required back at the time. And so, but again, it's HDF5 JSON. It's not like anything YAML-ish or as I say, more towards this hierarchical organization and representation of file content. So that's basically all I have. If there are any more questions, let me see. I don't know. No chat questions. So any other comments or questions or anything HDF related?
No, I second the motion, though, Alexander. It is a great session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for joining. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
But anyway, I see this is where we are at. Let's keep the forum discussion alive. And as I said, if someone feels like tackling this thing, I think we can come up at some starting point and then see how it goes. But I really am not aware of anything that's sort of ready to go as from all of this that we now discussed and be out there. I might be wrong, but I'm not aware. All right then. No more. Then thanks for coming. And Lori, if you want some final announcements and things, and then we can wrap it up.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Alexander, for that. It was really cool to pick up a forum post and talk about it here. Next week, I'm pretty sure Dana will be stepping in to talk about the upcoming HDF 4 3.0 release, which will come up before the end of the month. So tune in next week. All right, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.